confirmed £26 billion in tax rises. No tax cuts, no growth measures, tax rises. And the big one, she's extending the freeze on personal income tax thresholds, which means millions of ordinary workers get dragged into higher brackets without earning a penny more. This is the stealth tax on Britain. The quiet raid on every payslip in the country whilst rewarding people on benefits. Reeves keeps smiling with a red box, but this is a budget that squeezes workers, families and small businesses to the bone. And while she's patting herself on the back, watch what happened in the comments today. Kemi Badenoch absolutely destroyed her.
Good day and welcome back to the British Report. Imagine, if you will, a scene where Robin Hood does not steal from the rich to give to the poor, but instead our Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, stalks into a 500-year-old cathedral, checks the collection plate for loose change, and then slaps a 20% value-added tax bill on the leaky roof. It sounds like a plot from a particularly grim Charles Dickens novel, but for the clergy and congregations of England and Wales, this is the cold, hard reality of the latest Labour budget. We have seen this government take on the farmers, we have seen them squeeze the pub landlords, and we have watched as they tighten the belt on the business community until the pips squeak. But now it appears Rachel, from accounts, has set her sights on a higher power. She has decided that the Almighty's house is just another taxable asset, a stealth tax that could see the historic heart of our villages and towns crumble into literal dust. It is a move so bold, so reckless, and so culturally tone-deaf that it has reportedly sent shockwaves all the way to Buckingham Palace, where the defender of the faith himself is said to be absolutely incandescent. When you start taxing the repair of medieval stained glass to plug a hole in your departmental spending, you are not just managing an economy, you are presiding over the controlled demolition of British heritage. Quick favour, if you are loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers have not yet. It is free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Thanks, if you did. Now back to the show. Now let us dive headfirst into the radioactive core of this fiscal disaster. For those of you who thought the autumn statement was a one-off horror show, think again. The Reeves tax on our spiritual sanctuaries is the gift that keeps on taking. From this coming April, churches across England and Wales will no longer be exempt from paying value-added tax on their essential repairs. To the uninitiated, that is a 20% surcharge on the cost of keeping history standing. When Rachel Reeves took the keys to the Treasury in 2024, she inherited a Tory policy that was, let us be honest, a lifeline. It allowed churches to offset the value-added tax payable on repair bills, though it was later capped at £25,000 a year. It was a modest bit of support for buildings that are, quite literally, the stones upon which our society was built. But apparently, even that was too much for the new Chancellor. She has not just lowered the cap, she has removed the tax break in its entirety. It is the definition of ideological vandalism disguised as fiscal prudence. If a gargoyle falls off your local parish church next May, the Treasury wants its 20% cut before a mason even picks up a chisel. If you thought this was just about a few dusty pews and some old hymnals, you are missing the monumental scale of the social impact. According to the National Churches Trust, which is currently leading a desperate campaign to save nearly 1,000 churches and cathedrals in urgent need of rescue, these buildings are the ultimate social safety net. They are not just places for Sunday service, they are the local food banks, the playgroups, the warm spaces for the lonely, and the mental health hubs that pick up the pieces where the state fails. The Trust estimates that churches provide a staggering £55 billion worth of social benefit to the United Kingdom every single year. But here is the kicker. The Treasury's own internal calculations suggest that for every single pound invested in our churches, over £16 is returned to local communities. It is arguably the most efficient return on investment in the entire British Isles, yet Rachel Reeves is treating them like a luxury property development in Mayfair. Sir Philip Rutnam, the chair of the Trust, has sounded an alarm bell that should be ringing in the ears of every member of Parliament. He warned that once these buildings are gone, they are gone forever. There is no second chance to rescue a collapsed vault or a shattered 14th century window. It is a one-way street to decay, paved with the Chancellor's tax demands.
I will maintain all income tax and equivalent national insurance thresholds at their current level for a further 3 years from 2028.
But hold on to your pews, because the plot thickens with a layer of hypocrisy so thick you could spread it on a scone. While vicars across the country are checking under the seat cushions for spare change to satisfy the taxman, the Prime Minister's local church has been quietly rescued with a massive injection of public money. St Mary's Somerstown, located right in the heart of Keir Starmer's constituency, recently received a whopping £639,000 from the government for its repairs. One rule for the Prime Minister's neighbourhood and another rule for the rest of the country. It is a narrative that is becoming all too familiar under this administration. If you are lucky enough to be on the Prime Minister's doorstep, the Treasury has a magic money tree for your masonry. If you are a historic church in Devon or a coastal chapel in Wales, well, you had better start a bake sale and pray the Chancellor does not decide to tax the icing sugar as well. If you thought that was the peak of the absurdity, let us move from the halls of power to the actual front lines of this decay. Take a trip with me to Totnes, Devon, where the 500-year-old St Mary's Church is fighting a losing battle against time. This is a building that has stood through the Reformation, the English Civil War and 2 World Wars, only to be threatened by a spreadsheet in Whitehall. It houses an ancient stained glass window and a magnificent 19th century organ, the kind of heritage that tourists from across the globe pay to see. For over 15 years, the local community has worked tirelessly to raise the £1.4 million required for urgent repairs. They were almost there, standing on the finish line of a marathon effort. But then came the Chancellor's change to the value-added tax scheme, which has instantly left them with a £130,000 shortfall. Father Jim Barlow, the rector at St Mary's, described it as a big knock. After a decade and a half of planning, they have been kicked back to square one. These are people who have taken community responsibility seriously, only to be punished by a government that claims to value local empowerment. Now let us cross the border into Wales, where the story is even more heartbreaking. St Ilchard in Glamorgan is one of the oldest churches in the land. It stands on the site of a Celtic monastery founded about 500 AD. That is 1,500 years of continuous history, folks. It was the oldest centre of learning in Britain, a place where saints were trained and the flame of civilization was kept alive during the Dark Ages. Today the roof is leaking so badly that buckets have to be placed in the aisles to catch the water. The repairs are estimated to cost £500,000, but without the government's grant scheme, they must find an extra £100,000 just to pay the tax. The church is effectively in limbo, watching as the rain washes away centuries of heritage. It is a bizarre spectacle. A government that talks endlessly about education and learning is effectively taxing the birthplace of British education out of existence.
We're calling it hidden or stealth tax, partly so it sounds less intense. Fiscal drag has been happening for decades. The rapid increase in inflation makes the squeeze on your earnings more and more painful. Let's take a look at the personal allowance in 2015. Back then, Tory Chancellor George Osborne raised it to £10,000. 10 years later, and it's at £12,570, a 25% increase. But inflation has gone up roughly 40% over the last decade.
Relatably, imagine you are trying to restore a classic car, a beautiful vintage Jaguar that has been in your family for generations. You save up every penny for the parts. You do the work yourself, and just as you're about to fix the brakes, the government shows up and says, "That is a lovely car, we are going to tax you 20% on every bolt and washer just because it is old." You would never be able to finish the job, and eventually the car would just sit in the garage and rot. That is exactly what Rachel Reeves is doing to the National Garage. She is making it financially impossible for communities to maintain their own history. And let us be clear, these are not buildings owned by wealthy corporations. They are owned by us, the public, and maintained by volunteers who are already feeling the squeeze of the cost of living crisis. The political backlash is quite frankly electric. Tory Member of Parliament Saqib Bhatti has branded the church tax as despicable, calling for the Prime Minister to do the right thing and restore the listed places of worship grant scheme. He reminded the House that churches are custodians of our heritage and sanctuaries for people of all faiths and none. It is a rare moment where the religious, the secular, the historians and the economists are all singing from the same hymn sheet, and none of them are singing praises for Rachel Reeves. Even the Department for Culture, Media and Sport seems to be at odds with the Treasury. A spokesperson for the department recently described these buildings as vital community hubs. It seems the left hand of the government knows how important these buildings are, while the right hand is busy picking their pockets to pay for the Chancellor's latest project. But what about the King? As the defender of the faith and the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, King Charles has a constitutional and personal duty to protect these institutions. His Majesty is well known for his love of traditional architecture and his commitment to preserving the British countryside and its heritage. The rumour mill in Westminster suggests that the King is deeply concerned about the impact of this stealth tax. Imagine the tension. A king who has spent his entire life advocating for the preservation of our historic environment, now faced with a chancellor who sees a medieval spire as nothing more than a value-added tax opportunity. It is a clash of values that goes to the very heart of what Britain is. Are we a nation that respects its roots, or are we just a tax haven in reverse where everything is for sale and nothing is sacred? The Reeves tax is more than just a fiscal policy. It is a symbol of a government that has lost its connection to the people it serves. It ignores the tireless work of people like Father Jim Barlow in Totnes and the parishioners in Glamorgan who are literally catching the rain in buckets. It ignores the £55 billion of social benefit that keeps our communities together. And most importantly, it ignores the fact that once these treasures are lost, they are gone forever. Rachel Reeves might think she is being tough and forensic, but in reality she is being incredibly short-sighted about the long-term cost of this grab. If the social services provided by churches collapse because the buildings are condemned, the state will have to pick up a bill far larger than any value-added tax revenue they might collect. As we head towards the April deadline, the pressure on the Treasury is mounting. The National Churches Trust is not going away, and the stories of decay from across England and Wales are starting to dominate the headlines. This is a battle for the soul of the country. Will we let our history crumble, or will we force the government to realise that some things are worth more than 20%? The church tax is an unforgivable burden on a generation already struggling to keep their heads above water. It is time for a U-turn before the first spire falls. The Chancellor needs to realise that you cannot balance the books by bankrupting the national spirit. Thank you for watching the British Report.